Okay, welcome back everybody. Today we're going to do a tutorial on the granny square. I love granny squares. They can go on forever and ever and they can be so colorful, and there's literally thousands of different variations of granny squares. They all work in the round. You're going to crochet around and around and around. There's no rows going back and forth. The first thing we need to do is a slip stitch. The first thing we need to do is a slip knot. So if you're still struggling with your slip knots, I will leave a link to the tutorial in the card above. So we've got our slip knot, and we're going to chain up 4 chains. There's 1, there's 2, there's 3, and there's 4. The next thing we're going to do is we are going to do a slip stitch into the first chain on our hook. Well, it's not really on our hook anymore, it's down here, but we're going to insert our hook into that first chain space. So that's going to go in there, and we're going to pull up a loop, and if you look closely, we're going to pull that through again, and that's going to make a little circle. In fact, that little circle is what our whole granny square is going to be built into. That one little circle there. Okay, the next step is to chain up 3, because we're going to start doing some double crochets, and we need to get some height. So this chain 3 is actually going to count as a substitute double crochet. So we're going to double crochet into that circle. We're not going into a stitch, we're going into that circle that we created. So into the circle, pull up a loop, pull through 2, pull through 2. So now we've got our chain 3 space, our chain 3, and we've got our double crochet. So we're going to do that one more time to create a cluster. Into that circle, pull up a loop, pull through 2, and pull through 2. It can be a little bit fiddly at first, it looks a little sloppy, but all of this is going to be covered up by these clusters that we're making. These 3 double crochets are a cluster. We're going to chain 2 now, because we're going to make the corner, the first corner of our square. These 3 this cluster of 3 here is our first side. The chain is our first corner. So we've got our corner made, we chained 2. We're going to do 3 double crochets back into that first circle that we made. So here's the first double crochet, pull through 2, pull through 2. Now we're going to do another double crochet, pull through 2 loops, pull through 2 loops, and another double crochet. Pull through 2 loops, and pull through 2 loops. All right, that's 2 sides done and 1 corner. So now we need to work on our next corner by chaining 2, and back to our double crochets. There's 1, There's 2. And there's the third double crochet. And like I said, we covered up all that sloppiness on our first ring there. And now we've got 3 sides and 2 corners. Here's one side, 1 corner, 2 sides, 2 corners, 3 sides. So we need to make another corner by chaining 2. And as you guessed, we're going to double crochet into the center. There's 1. There's 2. And there's 3. That's our 4th corner. I'm sorry, our 4th side. 1 side, 2 sides, 3 sides, 4. We've got 1 corner, 2 corners, 3 corners. We have to put a corner in here. So we're going to chain 2. And we are going to look for the top chain on our chain 3 that we started with. We're right back to the beginning. This is where we started. This is our chain 3. So we need to find the top of our chain 3 because we are going to slip stitch into that to connect our corner to this side. And that's going to finish our first round of our granny square. Now I like to use the hook part of this when my chains are a little tight because it helps me kind of fish out that corner. They can be a bit fiddly, especially if you're kind of a tight crocheter, and I can be kind of tight on my tension sometimes. Oops, I think I wrapped my hook and I didn't mean to. Let's try that again. Let's insert that hook, pull through that loop, and slip it through the second loop. And that makes the beginning of our granny square. Okay, so now we've got 1 round done, and we're going to start with our second round. Now this time we're not going to work into the center circle. We're going to work into our corner spaces to make this bigger. So we're still going to chain up 3. In fact, every time you finish a round, you're going to chain up 3. And that is always going to act as your first double crochet in the round. So I've chained up 3. I'm going to turn my work because I'm going to work first into this corner right next to us, or right next to my my chain here. So here's my double crochet in, pull through 2, pull through 2. Loosen up my ball of yarn here. Okay, let's do that again so that we have a cluster of 3. Pull up 2, pull through 2. So there's our first cluster. We are in a corner though, so we need to continue our corner. We're going to chain 2 to make our corner. Double crochet 1, double crochet number 2, and double crochet number 3. You get really good at doing double crochets when you're working granny squares. Now I've got 1 on this side and 1 on this side because here's my corner. So I need to go into this next corner space and I'm going to create my side of my square. A lot of people chain 1 here and they create a bigger space in between this cluster and the next cluster, but I kind of like my clusters close together, so I don't chain in between my granny squares. I just go right into it. And you still have a nice big space there for crocheting into later, but it makes the weave of the fabric that you're creating a little tighter. Oops, I split my yarn. Let me do that nicely. So there's 2 double crochets, and here's my 3rd double crochet for that cluster. And you see I have this space on top of this cluster. There's always going to be a space on top of each cluster for your next row. Okay, so once again, we're in a corner. We're going to chain 2. There's 1, there's 2, and we're going to create a double crochet cluster of 3 into this next corner space. The same corner space, I should say. There's 1. There's 2. And there's 3. And that completes this side. And this corner are complete. So let's keep going. We're going to jump right over this cluster and go into the next corner with our double crochet. There's 1. There's 2. And there's 3. This tail's kind of in the way, but we want to keep it a little bit long so that we can weave it in later. So once again, here we are at a corner. We're going to chain 2 to create that corner and double crochet into that same corner space. Number 1, number 2, and number 3. Now once again, we're going to jump over this cluster and go into this corner here. There's 1. There's 2. And there's 3. We have 1, 2, 3 corners, 1, 2, 3, and half of a side. So we need to create our other corner here and a cluster for this side. 1, 2, and 3. And now we need to finish this square by attaching it over to the first chain that we did, the chain 3. So we're going to do that with a slip stitch, just like we did in the first round. You're going to do this with every round so that your square stays all nice together. Oh, I was able to slip it through very easily that time. Always helps to keep that top stitch a little loose. And there we go. Take a little break here for a second. Okay, so I thought for the next round we would change colors, just so you can see how interesting it looks when you can change the colors on them. And changing colors is a lot easier than you might think. I snipped my yarn already. But you're going to insert your hook, and instead of chaining up with the pink, we're going to just chain up with the green. We're just going to pretend that this is the working yarn. So I'm just going to put that on top of there, just like it would be my pink yarn coming through. I'm going to tighten that down a little bit on the pink. But there I am. And later on, I'll tie this off. You would tie this tightly so that it wouldn't come apart and weave in the ends. Okay, so there's 1 chain, there's 2, and there's 3. There we go. It was a little stubborn there for a second. Sometimes our yarn can be fickle and stubborn. So let's turn our work over, and we're going to now work into this space here above the first cluster there. So always important to make sure you're using your working yarn, not your tail. You won't go very far if you're just working with your tail. We're going to work with our working yarn. So we're going to do a double crochet into that space. pull up a loop, pull through 2, pull through 2, and one more to make our cluster. Our chain 3x has a double crochet, 2 double crochets, and that makes our first cluster. Now, because it's getting bigger, we're not at a corner. We're still not at that corner yet, so we've got to jump over this cluster to get to the corner. So we start with a double crochet. Whoops. This yarn's a little bit splitty. Stop splitting. Here's number 2. And here's number 3. And now we are at the corner. So we need to chain 2. And we're going to insert our hook and start with another cluster. There's 1. There's 2. And there's 3. Continuing across the row, we're going to just jump over here. There's 1. Two and 3. I'm trying to slow down. After you've done granny squares for quite a while though, they really do just start to fly by. You can start pulling these off really quickly. So once again, we are not at the corner yet. Our corner's down here. So we're going to jump over that cluster. One double crochet, 2 double crochets, and 3 double crochets. Now we're at the corner. Now we're going to make our chain 2. Our second cluster in the corner. I like these bright colors next to each other. I am a definite sucker for the bright colors. Okay, so we've completed this side. We've completed these 2 corners. Now let's work on this side. Oops. There's 1. There's 2. And there's 3. And the next one. 1, 2, and 3. Now we're at the corner, so we chain 2. One, 2, and 3. We've got 2 sides done. 1, 2, 3 corners done. Let's continue. 1, 2, 3. Oops, I almost chained 1. Okay, let's get to that corner. 1, 2, and 3. Now we're at the corner. Now we can make our chain 2. Back into the corner. 1, 2, and 3. And looks like we have come all the way around, and we need to just slip stitch into our top chain. Oops, I almost pulled the working yarn. Or I'm sorry, I almost pulled the tail. I wanted the working yarn. So I'm going to actually just slip that right through there just so I can hold it down nice and tight so we can take a look at it. And let's pull this back through here. There we go. Now we can take a nice look at it. And again, you would tie these together and weave in the ends at the end. I'll have to do a weaving in of the ends tutorial.